Welcome to the Married People podcast, where we help you make marriage real, fun, and simple. Each week we have honest conversations about one simple thing that can make your marriage better. Because when your marriage is better, everything's better. I'm CJ, and I've been married to my wife Terry for almost 5 years. We don't have kids yet, but we will probably soon. And sitting around the table today, we have Afton Phillips, who is our resident newlywed.
Thank you very much. My name is Afton. I've been married for a year and a half to my husband, Hudson. And we have 2 dogs, and I have one stepson who is 13 years old.
And we have our 22-year marriage veteran. He's an author, speaker, and director of MarriedPeople.org, Ted Lowe.
Hey, everybody. I've been working with married couples for a long time. I've got 3 kids. I have a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and a 12-year-old, and been married to Nancy Hoblitzel Lowe for the last 22 years.
Which one of your kids is your favorite?
Which one of my kids is my favorite? Depends on the day. But we let them know we're only keeping 2 of them. So it's this constant angst to be good
2
enough.
2 max.
Yeah, 2 max.
That's healthy. I like it.
So you know.
Together, we are excited to be launching this brand new podcast, the Married People Podcast. And before we get into what this podcast is all about, we love to tell you what this podcast is not. Because honestly, when I hear marriage podcast, a lot of things come to mind, and a lot of things that are sometimes not awesome come to mind. So Afton, what is this podcast not about?
This podcast is not just for my mom and dad's marriage. When I think of Married People podcast, I think like very heavy drapery on windows, like burgundy, and like plush forest green carpet.
Right, lots of tassels on pillows.
A lot of fake foliage.
Right.
And that's not what this is.
All right, Ted, what else is this podcast not?
I'm not sure what that means after, but I kind of do. It's the scary part. I've been hanging around you long enough. It's not just for couples who are in crisis. Yes, this will help couples in crisis, but it's not just for those couples.
And it's not just for couples who are perfect.
Yeah, and it's not just for couples with kids, because I don't even have kids yet. So it's not just for couples with kids and parenting advice, right?
You don't even have a dog, CJ.
I know. I've got plenty of family members with dogs in our extended family, so we're good there.
And it is not just for adding another thing to your to-do list.
That's right. Hopefully it'll be an enjoyable part of their day and not just another thing that's tough, right?
Another thing to add to the fridge grocery to-do list.
We don't want any more of those in our lives. And it's not just for resolving an issue. People can get so caught up in this one issue that the issue becomes more important than the marriage. We're going to kind of talk about that.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just for fixing your spouse, though it might 80% be for fixing your spouse, right, Ted?
No.
Okay.
This is, we're only speaking, people that are listening, we're only speaking to you, not your spouse. Because isn't it so easy? You hear these great things about marriage, you think, oh, my spouse really needs to hear this.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait
I think about that while we're talking now. When I'm speaking, I'm thinking of what he could be doing.
And we're going to turn that ship in a little bit of a different direction, right?
So Ted, we've talked about what this podcast is not. What is this podcast then? What is this podcast really going to be all about?
Yeah, I think of this as like marriage help 2.0, where it's a little bit different than what we've experienced in the past, where we feel so overwhelmed by so much information.
Yeah.
And so each week we're going to take a look at one question, just one question, and the answer hopefully will help every marriage, regardless of where you are. If you're really struggling in your marriage, this will be great for it. If you're kind of surviving in your marriage, you're kind of living with roommates a little bit, it's going to be great for that. But even if your marriage is doing great, then it's also going to help it continue to do great. But again, just looking at one thing with one helpful thing that's going to help.
And I am so excited about the one thing today, the one question we're going to be talking about today, because this is a question that I know Terry, my wife, and I have talked about a lot. When we see couples in our lives who are struggling, or just hear about like friends or relatives that are struggling in their marriage, like we always wonder, like what is it? What happened in their marriage? What makes a marriage thrive? What makes it good? What makes it bad? And that's what I'm so excited to hear what you have to say about this, Ted, because I know you've been working with married couples for 16 years now. And so the question we're looking at today is, why are some marriages good and others bad? So Ted, why are some marriages good and others are struggling.
Yeah, Ted, tell us.
Tell us.
Just tell us the answer.
Yeah, really quick. Well, we're gonna get to that, but I think the thing that most people, when they start thinking about marriage, and a lot of them don't even want to think about it for this reason. The tension is that people are overwhelmed by what it takes to have a good marriage. When they think about it, they either put their fingers in their ears and go la 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 because I don't speak this language that I'm hearing when
That's
talk. Yeah, people do. It's like, oh, and they feel like if I rip the Band-Aid off, I might bleed to death, kind of thing. And they're afraid, or they feel like they've heard some marriage podcast or some kind of instruction, and they go, wow, that is a language that I don't speak. I don't live in that world. And then I think people have heard the things that we've all heard, which what are some of those things for you guys?
It's really interesting. We got married a year and a half ago, and when we announced our engagement, I was shocked by how many people came to me and were like, congratulations, but this is going to be really hard. And not even any rainbow at the end of it. It was just like, hey, I'd like to come in and be your little dose of reality check while you're extremely happy right now.
Why do you think people feel the tendency to do this? What's behind that? Because I don't think it comes from a bad place. Where's it coming from?
They're jerks.
I just always, I remember those moments. People say, oh, to have a good marriage, it's going to take a lot of hard work. And they're, like you said, it's a reality check.
They're trying to prep you for something, and you have no idea why or how they're prepping you for something.
Right. They're it's just going to be really hard.
Yeah.
Bon voyage.
And you're like, what does that mean?
What is it? Well, and that's just it. They don't tell you what it means. It's like they walk up to you and go, hey, need to let you know, you've got a really bad disease. Right. And then they just walk away and you're like, I guess that's helpful. I don't know what the disease is. Don't know what to do about it. And so we hear that. And I think what they mean is it's going to take a lot of hard communication, which is the other thing we hear. Oh, you've got to have great communication. You got to have hard, difficult conversations that you don't want to have. It's what I think that they're meaning by hard work.
But they don't even tell you what communication means. You hear that so much in the marriage space.
Gotta have good communication.
But defining that and being like, well, I text my wife throughout the day, and then we talk about our days at the end of the day. Is that good communication? I have no idea. Or maybe we need to be sitting on the couch holding hands longer, talking about what we had for lunch.
Staring into each other's eyes a lot longer.
Right.
With lots of well, and that's the thing. Even some of the communication skills, like reflective listening, some of the research on that's a little bit sad. It's like the reflective listening. So what I hear you saying to me, Nancy, is, do you think I'm a jerk? Is that right? Yes, that's right. So, and what they've come out with the research is, even couples that counselors say deem them as, okay, you understand how to do reflective listening, which is a good skill to have. But what they found is 6 months later, they don't have the skill anymore. So then they're like, even if we get these skills, and again, I don't want to slam any kind of technique that's helpful for people. At the same time, when that's the whole answer to marriage, that's a little bit scary, especially when you've got people that aren't great communicators or they don't want to talk.
And another thing when it comes to why are some marriages good and bad, something that's actually really scary to me is I feel like a lot of times people are like, well, we just don't have good chemistry. And that is really terrifying because obviously at some point you thought you did have good chemistry and you married this person, and then 10 years later you're like, well, we just don't have chemistry anymore.
Or
and I'm like,
changed. We're different people
we're different,
now.
and
so
now
we
it
have
doesn't
a
work.
bad marriage.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's terrifying.
So as long as
what
we
control over that do
as
you
long
have?
as we keep the chemistry going, then we're going to have a good marriage.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I think people see the chemistry as very cosmic. It's this thing that floated together, and we found each other. We've got this great chemistry, and we've heard every song's about chemistry. Every movie, romantic movies about the chemistry, and so there's no wonder people think, hey, part of marriage or part of finding each other at least is this chemistry. And they've actually done some pretty fascinating neuroscience on this stuff. Is they will actually run people through MRI machines who say they're in the infatuation stage while showing them a picture of, they call it the beloved, which I know Afton hates
love that
the word
word.
That's
beloved.
an adorable word.
Well, so they're showing
go
them
home and call Hudson my beloved.
my beloved.
My beloved, will you please make some coffee?
My beloved. So they show them a picture of their beloved, but they're running them through the MRI machine while showing them a picture of their beloved, and something amazing is happening. the frontal lobe, which is where all long-term reasoning and planning lives, greatly decreases in activity.
Okay.
So it's like, I'm not thinking anymore, man. But here's the crazy part. While simultaneously 3 areas of the brain light up like a Christmas tree. And it's the same 3 areas of the brain that light up when someone uses cocaine. So I always say, hey, when you met and fell in love, you weren't really in love, you were stoned. Because you think about this whole thing of like, it's this infatuation stage where we say, hey, do you want to do life with me forever until one of us dies? Like we convince another person to do that. So it's a little bit of a crazy notion, marriage. And so we get married, but couples, once they're married, the chemistry changes, right? The frontal lobe.
So why is that? Just reality sets in, or what causes those changes?
You know, I don't know if I'm smart enough to answer that question. I just know that it changes, and it starts, the frontal lobe comes back together, and they start, what was fascinating is now irritating.
It's because you saw them on the toilet now, CJ.
Yeah. Nancy, I used to leave my keys.
Now your frontal lobe works again.
Your frontal lobe is working again. It's there it is.
Yeah.
Like when we were dating, the fact that I would leave like my wallet on top of gas pumps was really cute to her. Oh, he's like a little boy. That's precious. That is precious. It's not so funny when I leave her kids on the top of gas pumps.
Right.
But it checks back in, and then here's the scary part. People think when the chemistry changes and that thing happens, that something's wrong, that we don't feel like we feel before. And it's not that you don't have these great moments and you don't have these butterfly moments or these really thankful moments when you see each other. When I see Nancy, she's so beautiful to me. Like that's never, ever left. And I don't think it's going to leave. But people start getting scared. And some people even feel like, well, I chose the wrong person. Once I really got to know them, now we don't have this chemistry. And they literally leave over this thing that they feel like, I need this feeling. And then they connect with another person.
Right.
Now they're back in that infatuation stage, right? And now they're thinking, oh, here it is. I just picked the wrong person. So it's really dangerous. But it's one of those things where we don't need to get too hung up on chemistry.
I do want to say it makes me like the tiniest bit sad that the infatuation thing only lasts for like a little while. Like I want to have the butterflies forever.
Do you still have the butterflies?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you still have butterflies?
But I'm only a year and a half in.
Yeah,
You're 5 years in.
Yeah.
I mean, but see, when you asked me that question, like my initial gut reaction is to be like, well, yes, of course. But because it does feel like, oh, if I don't have that, then I must not be having a great marriage. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's not the case. My emotional attachment to my wife and the feelings I have, it is very different than when we were 6 months before we got married. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like it does change, and Terry would say the same thing.
Yeah, and it doesn't change to bad necessarily, especially if we get this thing. It's now that was that phase, and then you move into another phase that's richer because now you have the history of the infatuation, and now you have this. We're living the reality of this, and we're taking care of each other, and we're protecting each other, and so we can make that really great, and it's part of your story, but it doesn't mean something's missing. I mean, there's definitely still emotional moments for sure. Marriage of its very essence is emotional. So there's not like you're not going to have emotions. In fact, those emotions actually get a lot richer. I mean, when I start thinking about in 22 years of marriage, or even, at 2 or 3 or 5, think of all the things you go through as a couple. It's the wedding, it's the funeral, it's the tough times, it's the finances, it's parents that maybe got sick. You go through these things together, and it's just so rich. I mean, they did a study that they highlighted in USA Today where they were tracking with couples who were on the verge of divorce, and they tracked with them for 5 years. And here's what they found. It was fascinating. At the end of the 5 years, the couples that reported the highest level of marital satisfaction were the ones who had reported the highest level of dissatisfaction when they first started the study. And what that actually means is there's something that happens when we go through tough times together. Yeah. And so it's a beautiful, emotions are not a bad thing. They're just different from this chemistry, if that makes sense.
Sure. Ted, it's funny because we'll go on BuzzFeed and take those quizzes that are like, which Friends character are you? And like Hudson will get Ross and I'll get Rachel. And I'm like, what does that mean? Because they went through a lot, and I'm not sure how compatible they are.
Right. Well, do you guys, as millennials, compatibility for a lot of couples, that's what brought them together. That's how they found each other, through compatibility tests. And I don't think those things are bad at all. I mean, if you find each other through compatibility, that's great. It's just not strong enough to sustain you. There's going to be days when you're not compatible.
Isn't that like what online dating is all about anyway? Like, hey, you fill out your profile and you check all of these boxes, and then they match you up, and now you're compatible. And like, you know what I mean? Like, so we really are a generation that is so focused on whether or not you're going to mesh well together. You know what I mean?
Right.
We rely on that a lot.
Well, I think character trumps compatibility every time. And I think that's where we are. That's a line from my buddy Ted Cunningham. And it's just, I think that's where we are. It's okay. So what does that mean? If it's not compatibility, and if it's not chemistry, if it's not hard work, if it's not communication, what is it?
So compatibility, chemistry, communication, hard work. We throw around these big ideas, and we, kind of going back to our question, like, why are some marriages good and others bad? I know at least I tend to look at those big things and like, well, that is going to determine whether or not your marriage is good or bad, whether or not you're kind of hitting these categories or not. So Ted, if that's not the answer, kind of how we're, dissecting this here, what is the answer? What is the answer to whether or not a marriage is good or bad?
I think the thing, and again, we want to do this every episode, I think the hopeful thing for everybody listening is, those categories are important. And there's things to be learned there, and there's studies behind those things. But at the end of the day, I think that the truth is good marriages are made up of micro moves in a good direction. Yeah. Bad marriages are made up of bad micro moves in the wrong direction. What I mean by micro moves, it's these small day-to-day interactions when we're texting each other, when we're calling each other, when we're deciding what to have for dinner, when we're deciding how to deal with a kid, when it's someone's birthday, or whatever those little things are. That marriages that are good have figured out that these small moves really, really, really matter. I mean, if it was the grand gestures that made marriages great, then, Valentine's Day, we could knock out all the romance, we could knock out all the intimacy in a day. We know that doesn't work. Yeah. If it was grand gestures, then Hollywood would have incredible marriages, right? If it was great vacations and those big moments, that would be great. But it's not that. And even for celebrities, from celebrities to people who are really struggling financially, it is truly these little everyday moves.
So it's not these gigantic, you've got tremendous communication skills, or you guys are just 100% compatible. It's the tiny little things.
Yeah, it's too theoretical. I mean, it's like, it's not the big theory of of health and wellness. It's about, hey, you go for a run today. It's about this, making the right move on this meal today. And so I think it's the same thing relationally. And we can watch these little things happen. And we've all seen them. So what I want to ask you guys is, what is a small thing? And we're going to call them micro moves. What is a small thing that your spouse has done lately that has mattered to you, that a listener might go, really, that wouldn't matter to me, but it's really mattered to you. And here's the reality: it only has to matter to you. But give us an example.
Yeah. For us, Hudson will sometimes get one of those little cutie paper cards that say I lava you with a volcano on it, and he'll write a little sweet note inside that says something sweet and oh, I'm so glad we're married and blah blah blah, and then he'll hide it under my pillow so that I find it at night, especially when he goes out of town and stuff like that. And it's a really small thing, and it kind of sounds stupid, but it means a lot to me because it's something that's not the unloading of the dishwasher or the folding of the laundry that we are going to do anyway because it just has to be done for survival. It was an extra thing. He was I'm gonna do this extra thing and go just the tiniest bit of an extra mile to make you feel loved and I care.
Yeah, it's we say extraordinary, but it's the extra on top of the ordinary. And these things don't have to be huge, but we do all these ordinary things. We do all the have tos, and sometimes we don't do the get tos, and that's a get to that mattered. Just him acknowledging, and it was just, he didn't have to do that, right? And it mattered. What about you, CJ?
So, Ted, are you saying, and I'll share one in a minute. So, are you saying a good marriage is made up of those moments, and a bad marriage is characterized by the opposite of those, that kind of a thing?
Well, and I think you think about it, yes, a card matters, but it's also a look across the table that matters. It's a pause that matters. It's the I'm going to unload the dishwasher that matters. It's the I'm going to put gas in your car that matters. It's that I'm not going to get frustrated with you even though you're being very frustrating that matters.
Right. But I think those little things kind of set you up on a different trajectory
Absolutely.
for that day, or even just like the next app. Like if I get one of those, if I get one of those cards, it's like, well, now I feel loved and I'm acting different for the rest of the night because I feel like I've been valued. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yep. And, they beget each other, that one begets the other. And they build on each other. And it's deposits in the bank. These little things are little deposits because bad things are going to happen. And then you have something to draw from.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, for me, so Terry is great at the Micromoves thing, and one of the best examples, at least this week, is that we meal prep on Sunday night, right? And we prepare all of our lunches for the week. Well, Terry prepares all of our lunches.
And then CJ shows up at work with his little Braves lunchbox.
Yes, go Braves.
Filled with all of the sandwich materials he will need for the next 5 days.
Right. Well, because we don't construct the sandwiches at home because then you get to work the next day and it's soggy.
And we get the pleasure of watching you construct your sandwiches
So
every
this
day.
was meatball sub week. So like the meatballs are in a container with the sauce, then we've got the cheese in a baggie, and then we've got the bread in a bag. Again, you combine them all, then you just have a
little
soggy
tiny
sub.
mayo, a little tiny mustard.
I don't put mayonnaise on a meatball sub.
Right.
So, but anyway, so the micro move that actually did matter to me that I thought about when you brought this up is so we bought Publix rolls. So Publix is a shopping center here in our area.
Grocery store.
Grocery store, shopping center. Same thing. And the bakery rolls at Publix don't come pre-sliced. And I knew that when we bought them. But when I got to work on Monday at lunch, so I put everything in my lunchbox, took it to work, and started unpacking it, and realized that the rolls were sliced. And I had a couple of rolls for the next day's lunches as well. And I realized that at some point, between that night when we packed lunches and when I left for work, she went in and sliced all of the rolls for me. And that was a big deal because we only have butter knives in our office. So, and I didn't think ahead enough to remember, if I don't cut these beforehand, I'm going to have to do that weird, just pull it apart with your fingers thing. And that's just not a recipe for a great meatball sub. And so I told her that when I got home that night, that was awesome. That was really thinking ahead. And it was a really tiny way for Terry to show me that she was thinking about my day, the next day.
So CJ, are you saying that Micromoves are as easy as sliced bread?
That's the name of this episode. Yes, marriage
exactly.
is easy as sliced bread.
At least when it comes to
yours.
My Micromoves or Terry's Micromoves toward me.
Well, and so I know some of our listeners are going, really, Hallmark cards and sliced bread, but Hallmark cards and sliced bread, because it is these moves toward each other. I came in, looked on my computer the other day, and Nancy at work had just put a post-it on there and said, "I love you because you're my favorite." And again, I'm a words of affirmation guy. That just kind of mattered. The day's kind of busy. You're going a million miles an hour, and all of a sudden, it's just this great pause. And when you think about the person that's listening right now, and they're really, really hurting, and they're hearing sliced bread, and they're hearing notes, they're probably maybe pull the car over and want to puke a little bit.
But I hear you.
But here's what I know for certain after working with couples for a very long time. These small moves matter. And when we start getting distant with each other, we not only drop the positive micro moves, because what? They don't deserve it. Because I'm angry. Yeah. Slice the guy's bread I'm angry with.
That's so true.
I certainly don't buy a card for somebody that I'm frustrated with. So they stop the positive and they start the negative.
And they also, sorry to interrupt you, they also jump to it must be these big things. It must be our communication's wrong. It must be that's the moment you go back to those big pillars. They're like, we're incompatible.
And then you're way too overwhelmed to even start to think about what that means.
Right.
And they can start doing these moves instead of being overwhelmed by the gigantic pillars. I want to encourage people that are struggling right now to take a move toward their spouse. What would happen to the spouse that you've been fighting about the same thing over and over, and you just paused it, and you said, you know what, maybe we're not ever going to see eye to eye on this. Or you're struggling, and maybe you do buy a card today. Or you're struggling, or you do want acts of service towards each other. You think about a couple that there's a lot of tension, and he or she gets, she gets in her car, and there's gas in the car for the first time. He hasn't done that in 5 years.
Yeah.
You think about waking up. He hasn't made the bed. He expects you to make the bed. All of a sudden, the bed's made. And it's these little bit of moves. The other thing, it's so small. It's when couples are really struggling, they stop the small things like manners. They stop using manners with each other. The thank yous go away. The pleases go away. And that matters. I mean, you think about how that matters at work. You think about how that matters with a total stranger to go, okay, start giving some more of your best.
Yeah.
To your spouse. True. Make that move. Be the relationship hero. Like, go ahead and swallow your pride, because at the end of the day, we've said this at the beginning, we won't say it again, it's when marriage is better, everything's better. Yeah. It's better for our kids, it's better for our health, it's better for our families, it's better for our work. Better marriages make everything better.
So, Ted, let's just drill down and make it super practical. So we kind of talked about these micro moves being, one of the biggest factors in whether or not our marriage is good or a marriage is bad. What is the thing we need to take away from this conversation then?
Absolutely. And each week we want to do that is we want to help people to pick one simple thing. We're going to encourage you to do one simple thing this week. And the one simple thing this week is pick a micro move. What is your micro move towards your spouse? What's it going to be? And just thinking that through. And one of the ways that I feel like we can help people decide.
Yeah, because there's a lot of things that could come to mind, right?
Absolutely. And that's great. If somebody's got, they may go, hey, I know what mine is instantly. When you were talking about it, I know exactly what I need to do. For people that need a little bit of help kind of processing, there's 4 moments throughout the day. There's 4 intentional moments throughout the day that matter. And we want to ask listeners who are kind of struggling to find a micro move to pick one of the following. These moments are when you wake, when you depart, when you return for the day, and when you go to sleep at night. They're just pick one of those moments. The number one time couples are fighting is at the end of the day when they return, when they reconnect. They walk in, hey, my day was awful. Well, you think your day was awful. You ought to heard my day. And they start getting into this competition on it.
Yeah.
A lot of people find that, maybe it's sleep. A lot of people really, really believe you need to go to bed at the same time, or you need to not have a television in your room, or don't turn it on for certain times. Like, to pick those micro moves. What is that one time during the day for the next 7 days that you're going to kind of change your behavior? You're going to have a micro move at that point. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. You want me to do mine?
Yeah,
sure.
Go for it.
All right. Well, my micro move is going to start with a short story.
A micro story.
I wouldn't expect anything else, Afton.
Once upon a time, Hudson, my husband, was out of town. He was at Comic-Con in California.
So I know when this happened. So this is pretty recent.
Pretty much like 5 days ago.
Okay, yeah.
And he was there, and he was having a great time. I was at home so lonely with my one dog, just very lonely.
Which and your son.
Yeah.
And and my stepson.
Right. So, and you need to tell everybody what your dog's name is, because I love this.
My dog's name is Maybe.
Right. But it's not spelled maybe.
It's spelled Maeby.
Right.
Which is very, very fun to get postcards from the vet, because it says maybe it's time for your next vet appointment. And I put that on the fridge and kept it there because I laughed every time.
That's amazing.
Maybe get off the bed.
Maybe it's time for your next vet appointment.
Yeah.
Come here, maybe.
Yeah. So that is my wonderful dog, Maybe, and I am a dog person, big dog person, love dogs so much. I have an alert set up so that I get an email whenever certain breeds of dogs come within a 25-mile radius of my house for adoption. One such email happens to come through last week when Hudson was out of town, to which I jumped in the car with my stepson and adopted the dog.
While Hudson's in California.
Hudson is in California. Also, my phone died halfway through this experience. So I was I literally sent him a picture of the dog, and then he said, and I quote, "Do we really need a second dog?" And I said, "That sounds like permission." Adopted the dog, brought the dog home. Side note, the dog is a mega dog. It is a horse. It is a Old English sheepdog,
that's
at
already
least
7 years old.
55
6 years
pounds.
old.
Yes.
Oof.
Age does not matter, CJ.
Right. You didn't adopt a puppy.
She is a well-established, mature
right.
dog.
Yes.
And adopted the dog, brought her home. Don't have a name for her yet, so right now it's maybe a new dog. Hudson has historically, in our marriage, always gotten up with maybe to let her out in the morning because it's early and she needs to go potty. And I don't like to put my bare feet on the outside because it's dirty in the morning.
Right.
So Hudson does that. So my micro move this week, in conclusion, to end the story, my micro move for this week is to be the one to get up and let the dogs outside in the morning.
To let the dogs that the dog that you adopted out instead of Hudson.
That's right.
Just making sure. Your micro move is to take the dog
and
out
take care
that
of
you
my
adopted.
own dog.
Okay. Instead of making Hudson do it.
That's correct.
Okay.
It's a small move, CJ. But that's what I'm willing to do.
The smallest of moves.
It's the micro of micro moves. It's a little borderline irrational, but we're going to roll with it. We're going to give you that newlywed mulligan card a little bit.
Thank you.
But listeners, you should know we're working hard with Afton on the side. We love her.
She's going to get there.
And you know, they're going to watch you. They're going to listen to you.
I'm going to get so mature over the course of this podcast.
It's going to be amazing. I think you're already mature.
I'm
more mature. It's like from the start of this episode to now.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm like a 7-year-old sheepdog already.
Exactly.
I'm mature as a 7-year-old and just as trainable, right?
Right.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
Love it.
CJ, are you going to tell us your micro move?
Yes, it doesn't come with...
Does yours have a story?
It doesn't come with a story.
Wah, wah. Sorry, listeners.
I have not adopted any new dogs this week, so I'm sorry. But my micro move is... Over the past couple of weeks, I've noticed that there's been a little bit of tension when I walk in the door at night. So that's kind of the moment that when you're walking through.
Because, CJ, 5 o'clock to 6:45 are the sassiest hours of the day. Right, Ted?
Yeah, they must be. Studies show they're the sassiest or brassiest.
Sassiest for girls.
Brassy for guys.
Brassiest for guys. Those are the brassiest hours for you, CJ.
Yeah, exactly. So, you mentioned the 4 times throughout the day. So the returning home at the end of the day. And it's not really tension, I use that word, but it's just like it could be better, right? And so when I walk in the door, I'm usually finishing up, kind of trying to transition from work mode to home mode, finishing up the text messages, sending that email, reading it one more time, sending it, that kind of a thing. And Terry's mentioned how I'm still kind of like on my phone when I walk in the door. And I know that it would matter to her if I was more intentional with those first, 20, 30 minutes when I walk in the door.
Right.
Because when I get home, she usually pauses if there was something on TV or, she stops, walks away from the stove or whatever, whatever she was doing and wants to chat. And so my micro move is when I walk in the door to just immediately go put my phone on my desk and just leave it alone for 30 minutes and just let that 30 minutes be the time for us to chat without the last pings of the day.
That is so powerful and the absolute perfect example of a micro move. People walk in on their phones or texting. It is communicating something macro. And it is, I've been gone all day. It's so important to me, what I've been doing all day. It's so important to me, I'm going to let it leak into what little time we have at night. And it just matters. When people say, it can't be these little things, it's these big things. You're like, no, it is a combination of those. And so we had a dear friend of ours, when we first got married, he said, don't be on the cell phone with each other in the car, which is now one of the things we do with our kids. Even our kids will go, just answer the phone. Who cares? Because they know that that's our rule. So
you don't talk on the phone even with your kids in the car?
No.
Wow.
No, this is our time. And they, now that they're teenagers, they don't want to talk to us anyway. So they're just, please pick up the phone so you don't try to keep asking us questions. But for us, hopefully the payoff would be, they chose us over other people. And that's the thing. That's what it's saying. I'm choosing you over work. I'm choosing you over anything else. I'm choosing you. And that's why those matter. My micro move this week is going to be, my wife is very, very responsible. There's strength finder, tests that we've all taken about here's how you're wired. She's off the charts responsibility. Here's the deal with responsible people. They're so responsible and all the benefits of that. But for her, when a question is asked of her, she feels responsible for whatever it is, whether she is or not. Whether that person's asking a question for her to be responsible for or not, she feels it. And so I've noticed there's, I've got 3 kids asking her where everything is. In this house, she does. She's like the Siri of where stuff is in this house. She knows where stuff is. And so my micro move is going to be not to ask her where anything is for a week, which is going to be really, really hard. Yeah, because it's just so quick for her, and it's so hard for me. Like, I can't find stuff.
Well, Terry's the same way. She does know where everything is.
I think women have like this like kind of sixth sense of like can just like feel in the house where everything is.
How is that?
I have that too.
You have that too?
Yeah. I know if something's like in the trunk, in the attic, in a box. Inside of a Tupperware container.
Right.
we got to look for studies on that because it's just true.
We do.
You do.
It's like a spider sense, but
it's a spider sense.
More
It's a wifey sense.
Sure.
Wifey sense.
We'll brainstorm some names.
Yeah. Or then that's not the one
we'll just keep thinking about it.
Wifey sense. Okay, we're going to need to brainstorm.
So, Ted, before we wrap up, do you have any other micro move suggestions for those that might be trying to figure out what theirs would be? Because I know we just discussed our 3, but it can be hard to figure out what you're going to do, right?
Yeah, and I think it depends probably where they are.
Yeah.
It's going to be, if they're having a lot of tension, it might be as easy, because couples are having a lot of tension. They only talk about things when they're angry, which is the absolute worst time to do it. Just even what's going on in your body with cortisol and stress. And we get to the end of these arguments and we go, I can't believe I said that again. It's because our body is kind of set up to lose. But we kind of take this neutral moment, like hopefully people right now, they're not in the middle of angst with their spouse, is to take this neutral moment to maybe send a kind text or an apology. Hey, you know what? Sorry I've been so stressed and I've been taking it on you. I'm so sorry, you don't deserve that. Or it is coming in, then walking in and dinner's ready.
Yeah.
And it can be some of the classics. Maybe you send flowers to work, whatever that thing is. But if you're stressed out, I think words become very, very important at that part. Yeah. And anything you can own of it, we can see. Again, it's so easy for us to see where they're wrong. But what of yours can you own? And let them know that you own it.
Yeah, that's great.
Whatever those things are. It's, again, it's text. It's being more affectionate. If your spouse is really affectionate, it's, maybe when you walk in the door at night, to make that time, walk up, make out for 30 seconds. And unless the kids are, after the guy at the table, well, make out for 30 seconds unless the kids are watching, then make out for 60 to make them want to puke, right? But she's you are really more the guy at the table.
I'm a little cringy.
You're a little cringy. Yeah. Okay, but for some people, they're not cringy on that. That would be a big deal for them to get a little kiss when they walk in the door. Or just acknowledge them. Again, it's like you were saying, CJ, like you stop what you're doing and you acknowledge them when they walk through the door. That could be a huge thing.
Yeah.
And it could be a question. How you doing? Like, how you doing? Feels like you're stressed out. Or like, what is one thing I could do to help you this week?
Yeah, well, that was great. This has been a really great conversation. And Ted, I thank you so much for bringing your wisdom and insight and your 16 years of experience to the table. I know I'm walking away with some, we do think of marriage, good and bad, it takes these huge pillars, the communication and the compatibility. And it's honestly a relief to realize that it has less to do with that and more to do with these small moments that I can do something about. I do have the opportunity to send my marriage in the good direction with these smaller steps. Thanks for joining us for the Married People podcast. We hope that today's episode helped you realize that marriage is a little easier than you think. If you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, leave a review on iTunes or wherever you listen to your podcasts, because your review actually helps us make this podcast better and get these conversations in front of more people who need to hear them. And finally, for more great resources to make your marriage better, check out Ted's book. Your Best Us. Check it out. You can find it on Amazon or wherever you buy your books. And visit our website, MarriedPeople.org. There are more great resources there for you as well. And join us for next week's episode, where we'll be asking the question, why do we have serious fights about silly things? And until next time, I'm CJ.
I'm Afton.
I'm Ted.
And thank you for listening.